Good evening, Hell Rats, and welcome to Metal Mayhem ROC. I'm your host, Southern Cal. Tonight's show, we're going to be talking to Richard Hendry. Is the author of over 21 books, the founder of the iconic 80s in the Park Festival held in Melbourne, Florida, and a guy who would rather really hang out with Batman more than Superman. So please, Metal Mayhem welcomes author Richard Hendry. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you so much, Johnny. I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, the book, Everybody Gets Laid, Nobody Gets Screwed, the true story of 80s in the Park. Take us, let's go to let's say, before you went into this venture, let's say, with your son, Kyle. Talk about maybe some of the things you had done before. Maybe tell us about that the record store you had in Virginia, let's say.
Sure. Well, I was never a fanboy. I loved music pretty much my whole life. And at one point I had a used record shop in Virginia before I moved down to Florida in '93. I always listened to 80s metal, 80s rock. So it was kind of ingrained in what we listened to around the house, including Kyle, which was, like 25 years younger than me. But so we had never done a concert of any kind. So it was great that we went ahead and just did like the biggest rock concert Melbourne had ever seen, from the very first time. But in many ways, it was like a car accident. So the easiest way to explain it was like a car accident. I mean, it started sliding out of control. At one point, we might have been upside down, and then the thing happened. But we had done a bunch of stuff. We had done a bunch of farmers markets, a lot of expos. We did a lot of health expos. I was a radio show host. I'd done a whole bunch of stuff. My resume is kind of a wild ride. Probably don't have enough time to talk about all of it, but we ended up. We knew that we could do. We knew we could do events, and we knew we could find vendors, and we knew we could do that sort of thing. But it was a little out of left field what happened to us. It really was, and it started truthfully at a country festival.
Was that the Kickin' Country or whatever we used to have?
Runaway Country.
Country.
Yeah, and I never made any secret about it that Gary was my muse. We were vendors there. I was running Nature's Market Health Food Store at the time, and we were vendors and we were sponsors. And when we were leaving, after the 3 days, I was like, wow, this is great. This is a lot like what we used to go to up north all the time. But for it to happen in sleepy Melbourne, Florida, we thought, wow, I didn't really think they could pull it off, but he really did. And that was when we started talking. And it was my wife that actually, because I said, I wonder what else you could do at the park. And she was the one that said, I don't know, rock the park, 80s in the park. And that was it.
Lucy being your wife. We're going to talk about
my wife. Yeah.
You said sleepy Melbourne, Florida. We're going to get back to that in a little bit because it is, and I think it played a big factor on some of the events that transpired during some of the middle years, let's say the third and fourth year of the festival. We'll talk about the first year you did it. 2013, you had a budget or on-hand cash to start when you came up with the concept of $740. You had a whole bunch of ideas, the 80s experience, the immersion, all that. Give us a little bit of the details on that.
Yeah, we had, we'd really fleshed it out over 2.5 hours after my wife went to bed, all unsuspecting. She had no idea what we were doing. And we stood around the kitchen and we were talking about what 80s in the park might be. And we went online and we were like, well, what 80sinthepark.com is available, which we took as some sort of sign from the cyber gods that this was it. We should definitely do this. But it was going to be a couple of bands and sort of a pop culture experience from the 80s. And so I really wanted things like Rick Springfield and, Belinda Carlisle, as well as rock and hair metal and all sorts of stuff. I wanted the whole spectrum. The whole spectrum. The problem is that that wasn't what the customer wanted, number one. And number two, a lot of the really popular things from the 80s were still very popular and kind of out of reach for our $740 budget. So that was, that was how it sort of tracked towards metal, and which I was happy about. It wasn't like I didn't like the music, but we thought we would deliver more of like a complete pop 80s time travel experience. And so, I say a lot of times in the book that we kind of missed the target, but we hit the tree. And that was really kind of what happened.
Oh, you had like you used the Rubik's Cube on all the advertising and stuff,
Yep.
total 80s icon. You had the the Back in the Future car, Back to the Future car there, some other things. Uh, it was a lot. I could see where it was all going, and it was definitely an 80s immersion for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, just a lot of chain of events and things that happen. And we're going to mention one more time, Sleepy Melbourne, and some sketchy stuff.
Yeah.
You talk about Kyle. Kyle was a huge part of this. You mentioned.
Yes.
Um, happened to see Kyle today. They came in for lunch. I hit him up afterwards just to chat with him for a few minutes. I asked him who was the inner circle, let's say, the top echelon of the 80s in the park people. And he mentioned your daughter, Taylor,
Yep.
your wife, Lucy, his wife, Lindsay, David, Julie, Charlie, Lisa, and Troy.
Right.
As being these were the people that probably were the main force behind the 80s in the park. Tell us anything you can about any of these people. I know Taylor personally. We've been good friends for quite some time. So what a great girl. Kyle, the same thing.
Yeah. The kids were really pivotal, and that's a good inner circle sort of thing. David and Julie were friends of ours that we actually met a little bit before the first 80s in the park, and they did some volunteer work, and then they sort of came full on into it afterwards. It was one of those things where people sort of came by, we would talk to people, and they would end up getting sort of recruited. We were a little like a cult. Once you started talking about it and showing some interest in it, we were like, oh, really? How many friends do you have on Facebook? Who do you know? Do you know any place where we can get some equipment? And so it was really kind of like that, where we sucked people in. But obviously, Charles and Lisa were great, and David and Julie were fantastic. But really, truthfully, at the end of the day, Johnny, it was really me and Kyle. I mean,
Yeah.
It was me and my 24-year-old son, and we pretty much were chief cooks and bottle washers. We were in charge of everything, including getting into as much trouble as we possibly could, and making so many obstacles for ourselves to overcome over the course of the 7 long years of 80s in the park.
We're talking about Kyle, your battles and Sleepy Melbourne here, with City Hall, and city councilor meetings and
Yeah.
administrators and code enforcers.
Mm.
After reading this book, I came to the conclusion easily that these people, just kind of like how I feel like they ran the runaway country out of Brevard County and Melbourne out to Silver Spurs and Ocala there, or not Ocala, Osceola. Where is it?
Osceola. Yeah, Heritage Park. Right.
Heritage Park. And what a great venue. And they welcomed them.
Yeah.
I think after they felt like when they got rid of them, they had no more problems until 80s in the park came around.
Yep.
And all these old timers that are kind of still here in the area raised a big stink about it. I mean, charging you excessive fees more than anybody else that was paying for the same services at the same arenas or auditoriums. And we're not even going to talk about when you tried to revise the country with the Space Coast country,
Oh,
the FBI vetting and driver's licenses and car insurance. My God, what are we going to Moscow or something? We're in Palm Bay, Florida.
it was really quite amazing. Yeah. In fact, the book is filled with stuff that honestly on their own could be a plot to a television show or a movie, but together it almost seems impossible. Yet there was nothing in there that was even slight hyperbole. Every single bit of it happened just the way I wrote it. And yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Just like it felt like they were, how many things can we pile on? What's the straw that's going to break the camel's back? But I don't think they knew who they were dealing with. You talked about the one quote where it's not how hard you can hit, it's how many hits you can take and keep coming back.
Yeah.
And you proved that quite well. Was that Sugar Ray Leonard?
Actually, no, that's from Rocky.
Rocky.
From Rocky Balboa. But I had met Sugar Ray Leonard years ago, and he had I asked him because I was like, hey, how do you do it? How do you I don't know, how do you get in the ring and just let people beat on you all the time? And without skipping a beat, he was like, nah, you just get used to it.
Well,
And
I got the story from Kyle about when he went down to, it was either to, I believe, to put the deposit down for the first year of the Melbourne Auditorium show, and pretty much being ambushed at City
right,
Hall by about 5 people that were sitting out of sight of him, his line of sight, and all just coming out at once and laying all this stuff at the last minute. Of course, 30 days out before the event, again, not giving you time to do what needs to be done and almost trying to force you to cancel the event. Thank God you didn't. And you persevered through these, because my first 2 years when you held the event in the park, I wasn't really into the hair metal scene so much.
mm,
First year or the second year you had it at the auditorium, we had a bad night at work, a Friday night. We had just opened our restaurant, our new restaurant. Me and Heidi just had a bad night, bad day. Once we got all the fires put out, I said, Heidi, let's go see. We can still get there, see the last 2 bands Friday night, Lita Ford,
right,
Quiet Riot. We hauled ass up there. We had a kick-ass night of entertainment up there. It took all of our shitty day away.
right,
And we went to the after party at the Crown Plaza. I had a chance to meet Jizzy Pearl, Alex Grassi from Quiet Riot. You
right,
had the Kiss guy out there, Gene Simmons, breathing the fire
right,
out on A1A there. I remember the cops coming by and turning around and just to see what was happening. But what a great event it was. And I wish I would have gotten into it sooner and seen some of those events in the park. By the last year you did it, we had become a sponsor. We
right.
were embracing it. We loved it. And we were looking for it to continue. But after reading all the inside part of this, you would understand how hard it was. Just the bullshit that you had to wallow through knee deep to get
Yeah.
these events on. And, thank you for your perseverance in that.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, we had, we figured early on that it would be a bit of an uphill battle, but we actually were thinking that that was going to be most of that stuff. We figured was going to be our ignorance. What we didn't know was going to be the things that hurt us. And as it turned out, they really had, in the park or any of the things there in Melbourne, you can't reserve them more than 364 days in advance.
Yep.
It takes 120 days to 180 days to get your permit approved. You can't advertise without any of that happening, and you can't advertise the event without a venue, and you can't get the venue and more than a year in advance. And honestly, if we had known what we were doing when we started, we would have never tried to do this in 6 months, because the next one took a year and we still weren't ready, and we had already had one in our pocket. And so, the whole thing is set where you just, unless you're Live Nation, unless you're some touring festival that has done this over and over and over again, you're out of luck. I mean, the numbers and the timing don't add up for you unless you've got, as a newbie starting out. If it wasn't for people that we met along the way that helped us, it just wouldn't have worked out the way it was. I used to have dreams of, waking up and there'd be people out in front of my house with, flaming torches and pitchforks, like some old Frankenstein movie. I mean, we lived and died by numbers and all the deadlines that we had to run. Plus we were working, both of us were working 40, 50 hours a week, running a health food store on top of it. So it was pretty ghastly, and they just kept turning up the heat. Every time we went down there, they found some other insane thing for us that we had to do.
Well, Kyle told me a story. You guys had one year a co-promoter of one of maybe two of the bands, and he was telling Kyle this story about he had a young kid working for him, and he wanted to be a promoter and this and that. And he told him, I put $10,000 cash in a paper bag and I lit it on fire. Now, if you can let that money burn out and burn away, then you have what it takes to make it in a promotion business. If you put that thing out, then you're not ready for the promotion business. And Kyle found that to be very prophetic, let's say, of what happened throughout the events.
It was such a shame he told that we ran into him and he told us that 3 days before the first event. We could have used that information about 7 or 8 months earlier. But in truth, I'd been a contractor in Washington D.C. I'd been to federal court against the EPA. I had I built whole buildings, and so for me, I was like, how hard could this be compared to unions and federal guidelines and all of that sort of thing? And I just couldn't have been any more wrong. Somewhere in the middle, I thought to myself, I wish I had to go talk to the EPA, but once you're in, you're in. I mean, you sink or swim. So we just
I
kept
think
swimming.
I think definitely conspiracy theories abound with the city and county here in Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, and it's a shame. You
Yeah.
know, I'm sure that they weren't asking the gem show people or the cat show people that go to the Melbourne Auditorium to pay double to get more lighting, more bathrooms.
Right.
That those places are already equipped enough for what they need to be up to code for their building. And here again, these people were just piling on, which is
Yeah. I am on record as having the largest fee for the Melbourne Auditorium in history. In fact, I think that there was 4 or 5 other concerts together that never paid as much as we did for just the one. So yeah, it was.
again.
I had to write 30. I think I wrote 60 emails to everybody in the building. I mean, I never thought of myself as a person who would have a lawyer on retainer. And then somewhere along the line, I was like, I need like 5. I need 5 attorneys. I need 5 different
Sure.
specialists.
If not
So
10.
yeah, yeah. Who's got that kind of money?
Let's quickly talk about some of the bands because the lineups there were amazing. LA Guns, Quiet Riot, Winger, Lita Ford, our own Melbourne's own Jack Starr and Burning Starr. Tough with our friend Stevie Rochelle from Metal Sludge.
Yep.
Great guy. Had a chance to meet him. He was living in Indy Atlantic for a little minute, about 8 months, he said, when I first met him. So that was quite interesting. Tell us about anybody who you liked, who maybe you didn't like, if you can. I mean, this is a long time after the festival. You're still got some things brewing in the future here, so maybe
Always. Yeah.
let's talk about some of your favorite bands that you played. LA Guns played every year, did they not?
Pretty much. I mean, they skipped, I think, 1 year, but we kind of referred to LA Guns as our house band, which was a little arrogant on our part, but we loved them and they loved us. And actually, the worse it got, the more they dug it. I mean, the code turned them off in the middle of Ballad of Jane on the last song of the night, and everybody lit the place up with their cell phones and lighters, and they finished singing it a cappella. And but before they got to the after party, people were like posting on Facebook, "Oh, they can't believe what you did to them. They'll never come back." The very first thing Phil Lewis did was came up and hugged me and went, "Whatever you want, whenever you want, we'll be back." We loved it. It was like they thought they were. They were U2 on the top of the bank building in the video where they got shut down. He said it was the greatest fucking rock and roll moment he had. And
A lot of assumptions by people.
Yeah.
Like you said, something so little, and once it goes down the grapevine, it's like telephone line. It is changed and blown out of proportion. And I think you got some bad press, definitely.
Oh yeah.
I always felt as if you, being one of your sponsors for one of the shows, always tried to do right by everybody and did not by just by the bands, by the fans, your sponsors. You did everybody right. I mean, you had to live in this town. Like
Sure.
I own a business here and I don't want to be, I have to live here. So I'm not going to fuck anybody over.
Yeah,
And
pitchforks and flaming torches. I mean, I never wanted to be one of those guys on television covering his head as he was walking to the car. It was funny. One of the things that we adopted early on, because we were adults, is that we weren't going to get into any pissing match on Facebook. And I got a lot of grief. I got a lot of grief from the crew from time to time because people would hit and they'd hit hard, and we would not respond. And I was like, look, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to keep doing what we do, and we're going to keep going forward. And when they say, you're never going to work in this town, you're never going to work in this town again, or whatever it was, we were like, yeah, okay, we're just going to ignore it. We're not going to, you don't see the CEO of Exxon on Facebook, having some pissing contest with somebody,
Not at all.
so we were like, fuck it, we're too busy working. And actually we are working. So, we'll just keep working. And we assume that eventually people will be like, well, I mean, we thought that they were going to stop, but they didn't. We thought that they were going to close, but they didn't. They thought that they were going to quit, or they were finished, or that band wouldn't come back, or this band wouldn't come back. And they kept coming back.
That goes right into, you talk about the bad reviews you're reading and things you're seeing on Facebook. There was also a lot of good stuff too. Chapter 27, when I started reading that, I had to close the book and look at the cover again and make sure I was still reading the same book, because I felt as if you could have been talking about my life in the restaurant business. The parallels were just, it was amazing. And like you said, with the reviews and stuff, my wife doesn't read them anymore. I will read them all, because some of the bad ones, maybe it is something you're missing, let's say, but it's done in a polite way. It's not that fuck this place and nobody should go there and this place sucks. Those hurt. I work in a business where every day I get critiqued. And when you get those, it hurts, not just you, your family, your staff. So I'm sure when all you guys were reading this, especially with all the work you put into everything, and you're reading some dickhead who doesn't know shit making some offhand comment, that just kind of sucks.
Yeah. Well, and I look, people are going to talk, and everybody's experience is unique to them, and to some greater or lesser extent, everything is really about them, but the truth is that, and it was hard to tell people this, but their feedback, while important to us, we wanted to do right by people. We wanted to give them the bands they wanted. We wanted to give them the show that they wanted. It really wasn't for us. God knows we didn't have a good time at it. I mean, we had a good time, but it wasn't nothing but a good time. I used to tell people, look, this is like going to a concert, right? And you're sitting in that seat over there, and you have a view of the stage, and that view is unique to you. But there's all these other fucking seats, and there's all this stuff down front, and there's all this stuff on the sides, and there's all this stuff behind it. And there's all this stuff that happened for months and months and months prior to it to make it all happen. So to think that by sitting in your seat that you've got like a good bead on what is going on, it's just not true. And it's hard for people to accept that, I guess.
Again, people just not a clue. I did just not a clue is what it takes to put an event on. And we're not just talking a one-night show. These were 3-day events, plus after parties, before parties, before parties, all sorts of stuff. And it's a lot of legwork. And I'm sure that when you factor in the cost of the entire package, like let's say your hours that you put in, your legwork and Kyle's, those weren't all even factored in to any of this.
Oh God, no. I mean, if we had done that, we would have been more negative than we were. I mean, if we had zeroed out, we would have made like 1 cent an hour. It was so preposterous. At 1 year, which I think was 2014, I think we did 100 road gigs leading up to the event. Now, mind you, we had 12 months to do it, but I think it was like 100. I mean, I burned people out. My buddy Jason, who had the trailer, the Airstream that we had with all the Pac-Man stuff on it and all, he was going out to events, and I mean, he just couldn't do it anymore. We dragged people everywhere. These big cubes that we built on site for the events downtown, this huge 8x8 Rubik's Cube. I mean, it just got bigger and crazier and larger, and And
you guys licensed the usage of the Rubik's Cube. You had to pay a licensing fee to use it, did you not?
We were the only people. We had a friend of ours, Robin, who had said to us early on, she was like, she was like, what are you going to use? Because we had like 15 different versions of the logo before the one that you all saw finally. And every one of them had the Rubik's Cube in it, and along with Atari and a whole bunch of other stuff from the day. And so she had a friend of hers that was a trademark and patent attorney. And she was like, I'm just going to run this past them and see where you're at. And so they looked through 11 or 12 different things that we were doing, and they sent back this long letter. And the gist of it was, everything is fine. Don't fuck with these Rubik's Cube people. get a hold of them and get licensed. And if you can't get it, do not use it. And so now we're thinking, oh God, I mean, how much is this going to cost? And it was a company called Seven Seas over in London. And the time change and nomenclature notwithstanding, we finally explained to them what it was we wanted to do. And they were like, all right, cheers, we'll send you a letter. And they did like a week later, and it was $379.
God, if everything could have just been like that, that easy.
I mean, honestly, I wanted to go over and kiss them. It would have cost more. I mean, one way would have cost more. And we were like, okay, so we can use this on television. We use it on radio. We use it on our print. We can use it in every fashion. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. That's all. So they weren't really pigs at all. What they were trying to do is just stop. Really, China they've been in like a 12, 15-year legal battle with China, because you go to the Dollar Tree and they have all these knockoff Rubik's Cubes, right? It's just not the same color.
Yes.
And that thing's been going on for 15 years. Poor Rubik's dead now. And I don't even think it was, I still don't think that they got any satisfaction out of it. So
a little bit like your lawsuit that you went through with, I think it wasn't Pig Fucker.
No, that was a whole nother story.
A whole nother one. This was a different guy. You had the lawsuit and you carried that on for almost 5-6 years or something. And at least you have the money to do that, and they can just keep something dragging out. Meanwhile, they're cranking those Rubik's Cubes out, making all that money, more money to pay for more lawyers.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was like. Our little thing, and Gallagher and I actually, we started talking a year after the whole thing started. He fired his manager for suing him. Yeah, and then our attorneys helped Gallagher's attorney because he was suing his manager for elder abuse. So I mean, it was a crazy situation, right? This great side story to the main story, and then Gallagher and I started talking, and we ended up being friends. In fact, just before his death last year, we were talking about doing an event together up here in Kentucky, which I thought was going to be the funniest fucking thing in the world, that him and I would end up doing an event together, but. You
didn't mention any names, but you did mention that you had forgotten that you needed to get some watermelons. So when you hear that, everybody of the day, it was Gallagher, obviously, with the watermelon. So
yeah, I mean, I never wanted to, just like with the Facebook stuff, I never really wanted to give much attention or any shout out to anybody we were having any trouble with. But yeah, it was Gallagher, and it was actually Gallagher's manager, and Gallagher, the manager lied to Gallagher, didn't tell him what he was there for. Truthfully though, Gallagher was getting high onto the stage all weekend, didn't do a damn thing. But
had a little problem with that apparently.
Well, we all did. And, but at the end of the day, it was 6.5 years, 278 filings, 19 different forms of depositions, and I think 8 or 9 court appearances. It included 5 different legal firms who ended up all suing each other. They passed around $250,000 between all of them by the time it was finished. I never paid anybody a fucking dime. And then I had my end of it completely dismissed. But there were some times when I thought it would never go away. It was like herpes in court.
Well, no, you shouldn't have had to pay for any of that after hearing the story of all that. So, well, speaking of characters, let's talk a little bit about the Batman, Superman. And you talked about the Superman kind of being a Boy Scout. I really felt that this kind of described and explained maybe who Richard Hendry was. I mean, Batman was cool as shit. He had a bat cave, he had a motorcycle, he had a muscle car, he jammed a bat guitar, and the chicks dug him. So how could you not lean towards Batman,
Sure. I mean, Bruce Wayne was a bad boy. He just also happened to have a shit ton of money. That was like, I think I was using that as an analogy about musicians, because I was never, like I said, I was never a fanboy. I didn't just love people because they were famous, but I really respect musicians because of what they could do. And I use the Batman analogy, which was, like Superman could do anything, but just because that's the way he was born. Whereas Batman, who could have just done fuck all, decided to make himself something else and push hard to become something else. And so I was really likening musicians to Batman, and I hope that they picked up on that if any of them read it. And yeah, I said, obviously at the end of the day, I mean, who the hell, if you had your choice, I mean, you'd want to party with Batman, not Superman. So
I have a picture of him jamming his bat guitar hanging in my studio. It's a sick guitar.
That's great.
Pretty cool shit. All right, Richard, we're going to, because we're limited on time, and I tell you, I had a million questions I wanted to get into, but we're going to kind of do a rapid fire section right here and just with some quick little answers for us.
Sure.
What was the longest negotiation time you spent trying to land one sponsor?
Um, 6 months, approximately 6 months, was our first attorney, Platt Hopwood.
And how about the craziest request you ever had from any of the bands on your riders provided by them?
All right, well, I won't tell you who the band was, but because most of them, wanted vitamin water and coconut water and vitamins, like they were all done with hookers and blow. But this one guy was like, where can I get laid? Where can you get me somebody? And we were like, I can't get you anybody, but I can give you a couple of addresses. Maybe you should talk to the people downstairs. I'm sure the bellhop can help you out.
It was definitely being upfront and forward about that one for sure.
Well, you get to a certain age, I think you just, say what you want. So.
Well, our own Vernon Maddock, our engineer, producer, and founder tonight, he put on a couple of shows in Rochester. The very first show he put on, it cost him and his partner about $500 to be fanboys for the show, but they learned what to do, what not to do. But I tell you, the lead singer, and you know what, he doesn't care, and I don't really care, but it was Dio, the Last in Line band, and the singer had Verno running all over God's Western New York, looking for some kind of specialty for his voice. It was some obscure stuff that Verno found in some candle store,
Sure,
in a hole in the wall place. He found it for him, but it was almost something that just really wasn't doable.
I'll bet that was called Throat Coat.
Road coat.
Throat Coat, yeah.
You know what, Rich? Take a 5-minute break. I'll go into my kitchen because that shit's sitting up in my pantry. I'll find out exactly what it is.
Because I bought a lot of that too.
How many bands? Now I talked to Kyle. He said in the 5 years that he did it, he probably got to watch. Now you got to figure 20 bands a day, 2 days for the first ones. That's 80 bands. You had 3 days for the next 3 years, I believe. So there's another 120 bands. So out of 300 bands, he said he got to watch 5. How many bands did you get to watch out of those 300 bands plus that you probably had on stage?
Well, I mean, it was a lot. There was a lot of bands. Maybe 3 is a little high, but it's close enough. I saw 2 or 3 songs a year, and I don't think I saw the whole song.
That's what I said to Kyle. I said, I bet your dad will break this down into songs and not so much bands. And it was probably because it was a long ride from one end of the park to the other. He got to see the whole song, let's say.
Well, and now when we were in the auditorium, I did hear quite a few songs, but that's because it was so small. But I can tell you that the year that Lita Ford was there, on that day, I walked 19 and a half miles inside the auditorium the entire time, going from door to door, looking for Lita Ford's money. And so, yeah.
And who graciously went on without the money right up front, no pay, no play. She disregarded that rule. A true champion of the metal thing. It was you brought some ladies in for the ladies to come and see, and she was totally cool about it. She got paid, she played and got paid, and there was no problems about that. So again, a true metal moment for the 80s in the Park, a victory for 80s in the Park, let's say.
Yeah, no doubt. Actually, their management was so cool about it because it was in 5s and 10s and 20s, and my pregnant daughter-in-law and I were in the trailer, counting the money over and over and over again because it was a substantial amount of money. And when we gave it to them, and then he's like, "I'm going to count this in front of you," and it was like $50 heavy, and he gave me the $50 back, and I was like, "Just keep the 50."
Right.
I'm so sorry.
Late fee. A little juice for the late fee, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Now there's been rumblings in the grapevines. You're up in Louisville now,
right?
Working at Lynn Stadium.
Yeah, I'm the events manager for the stadium up here. And
there are possible plans work. I don't want to say that it's fully functioning yet or full tilt boogie, but plans of doing a venue or a show called 80s in August. Tell us what you can about it.
Well, we're originally the name of it was going to be Stadium Rock 80s, and that's because we were going to do a series of Stadium Rock, which would be different years, different decades. The nice thing about working for people who are well heeled is I don't have to worry about money. I mean, at the end of the day, I have to worry a little bit about money, but it's only their money, not mine. And so, it's if it all comes to fruition, then yeah, we're going to do something that we're loosely calling like the 80s days of summer, 80s days of August, where we'd have a 3 or 4 day event at the stadium, but then we would have ancillary events going on all week long. We were going to try and get the mayor to declare that week 80s week in Louisville, and he's very happy to do stuff for us. It's a beautiful brand new stadium. It's only 3 years old. We have 2 different soccer teams that play out of it, and I was really just blown away that I got the job, and we're doing a lot of cool stuff next year with that. So yeah, we are planning that, and that's going to be in August, and then we have something called She's Gone Country, which is going to be the first ever all-female country lineup that we'll be doing on my birthday, June 30th next year. So you'll have to track up to Louisville, and we'll certainly treat you right.
Well, how certain are you? Could you put a number on it of the 80s in August? 90%, 80%?
I would have said this morning probably 50-50. Now I'm probably about 75%. And it has nothing to do with bands or booking agencies or anybody that hates me. I've been in contact with all these bands and booking agents all along. And it's just a question of ownership and a few behind the scene things that we're waiting to have all that's finalized so we can get our budget finalized for the end of the year. So, but right now they want this. I mean, that was what they hired me for, was to bring in concerts, to bring in festivals, to bring in stuff other than soccer, because it's 365 days a year. They got 40 days of soccer, a lot of dark days, as they call them. And my job's to fill those. And it would be, and they literally said, like I've never strayed away from 80s. And the more distance I have from 80s in the park, the more I lean into it, where I'm like, yeah, you know what, if you've heard some crap about me, I don't give a fuck. And if you're going to judge me based upon that, then, it's probably not going to work for us anyhow. So, and when my interview, I talked about it. And the first thing the GM said was, can you do one for us? And I knew I had found my right job. So
being in Louisville, obviously a lot bigger than sleepy old Melbourne, Florida.
Quite a bit.
I think it would be a hit. And instead of like, I think for the first year, you had 7,000 people, maybe 10,000 the next year at the Park Festival. I think you could get it, especially drawing from the surrounding areas of Louisville, 20,000 a day in that place.
I think it's a pretty safe bet. Also because of places like the river, I can't remember, River Rocks, I guess, what is it? In Cincinnati, there's a lot of different venues, and because of that, in Indianapolis and Cincinnati in particular, and then of course Nashville to the south, while this is a great area for music, and they've got more 80s rock stations here than any place I've ever been, but they just don't get the bands. They don't get them here because they go to these other major areas, and people just travel from here to there. And so it's kind of cool. And I think really we have a lot of faith in it, and not just me. I mean, people who are a little smarter than me and have been doing this stuff a lot longer. So.
Well, if anybody's got the clout to do it, Richard, it is you. And if this is when it gets slated and it's full go, green light, Metal Mayhem ROC would love to come down, do a sponsorship with you.
That'd be great.
Both event, like an online or an on-site event, live promotion, and whatever it takes. I know you're a great guy, and the event was always awesome here. People of Melbourne appreciated it. It was iconic. It was a one-of-a-kind thing until some copycat people came along, so which kind of sucks. So, Richard, tell us how we can find out about. I know you have, I believe, written 22 books. You've had 8 of them published, somewhere in that ballpark.
It's actually 27. They've all been published. Yeah, but of course they're self-published, so let's not get too excited about that. But yeah, you can actually just look up books by Richard Hendry on Amazon, on Google, and it'll pop right up.
Awesome.
And there's all sorts of stuff, but yeah.
How about if somebody's looking for some history on the 80s in the park, they want to go back and look at, where can they find that?
I've got this thing called richardhendrymedia.com. And it kind of has all the books and videos and all sorts of. I did a little documentary a couple of years ago that I did, and there's some music from a ill-advised singing career that I had for 15 minutes, along with a whole bunch of information about 80s in the park, and a stupid bio that is unbelievable. So
You still own the domain name 80sinthepark.com?
no, I let it go.
Oh,
Yeah. We and rightfully and really it was okay because we stopped doing it, and the 80s on the Sand people who actually sponsored one year, and we worked with them. Deborah Foreman was part of that, the original Valley Girl, and they do their thing down in the Dominican Republic every year. And so we were like, it's all right. We'll just let it slide. So now I think it's linked up to them, and that's okay. I mean, 80s in the Park was a wonderful experience. It was frustrating and crazy and beyond belief, but I wouldn't trade any minute of it. It was the best experience for our family, and certainly Kyle and I, to be able to do what we did together as father and son was amazing. I couldn't have done it without him. And but all good things must come to an end.
right. Well, again, Richard, thank you for joining us tonight. Again, the book, Everybody Gets Laid, Nobody Gets Screwed, The True Story of 80s in the Park. What a great title. Thank you again for joining us tonight, Richard. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
For Metal Mayhem ROC, I'm Southern Cal. Perfect.
Okay.
That was awesome. Yeah, Richard, definitely let us know if you come in and get that all finalized. Me and Heidi, we've been talking about it nonstop since Kyle came in and told us about it a few days ago. And it was our thing. We enjoy doing it. We just wish we had started doing it a little sooner. So we would definitely make the road trip up to Louisville for that one.
It's
sure.
It's not really that bad of a drive. It's about 10, 12 hours. We're real close. It's just a question of who's going to be our parent company by the time the end of the year is, and that's really the only thing. I don't want to say anything on live about that, but
yeah.
Really that's it. And we should know in just a couple of weeks on how that whole thing goes. So, but the powers that be, all the investors in the stadium, all of them, they want this, and the community is ripe for it here for sure. So we feel pretty strong about it, and it'll be cool to kind of sort of get the band back together in a way, because we'll bring up people that worked at 80s, and Kyle will come up for it, and hopefully we get you guys up, and we'll get a bunch of other people. So
we try to limit the show, and it's due to people's attention spans, really, when you're watching something, to 30 minutes. We'll let it run to 45 because we can always edit it down a little bit. I didn't get a chance, or we mentioned it, but Pig Fucker. We, being the sponsor, we had a room on the second floor balcony. We were looking right down on the stage, and I saw that guy all day. Walking down to the front like he was Jesus parting the Red Sea coming down there. And I didn't realize this until I read the book and put it kind of together. The sound man cutting the power to the stage and just being dark for 40 minutes or so. Can I assume, or is it okay, that Pig Fucker, the sound man or lighting guy, and Ted Poley were all linked here? Was this his singer that was his roommate? Was it Ted Poley's band?
No, it was Jackal was the band that
okay.
that he had been, whoever the lead singer was for them at the time, was Pig Fucker's roommate in college or something like that. I don't know. You know what? The guy's told so many lies, it was kind of hard to figure it out. It's such a rarity that somebody like that gets past me. Like, I just kind of felt a little bad for him. His wife was crazy. I mean, there was like all this shit that was going on, and and it kind of reminded me a little bit of my dad. I mean, there was like this shit that happened with him that I overlooked all these signs that said, run the fuck away. And, but because you just couldn't imagine. You just couldn't imagine.
I never saw that coming. And, Taylor told us a little bit about what happened. And, she's like, I can't believe this guy got one over on my dad, and it's just so not my dad. And I mean, it really physically, and you could see that it upset her and pissed her off. And that guy was just shaking the fucking tree, everything that would fall out of it. So it was Jackal. I thought I had seen, while that was happening, there were pictures being sent in somewhere to Facebook or something about Ted Poley being down in a hotel room in the pool, and he was actually supposed to be on stage at that time.
So, what happened is that someone had told Ted something about the event, and they were still on. They had just gotten off of the Monsters of Rock cruise, and
Which a lot of bands had at that time, right?
yeah, and so he was talking shit about the event. I mean, the moment they docked, people were hitting me up and going, "What the hell's wrong with Ted Pulley? Why is he saying that this sucks? It's all fucked up. He doesn't even know if he's going." And I mean, that happened to me during that time when I was literally dealing with this screaming in my face from this guy for hours on end. I couldn't get rid of him. I mean, he just kept coming. And I called Ted and I was like, you know what? Fuck you. You know what? I'll pay you to not play. Goodbye. I don't even need you. Don't come, because I don't need anything else. I mean, I'm at the absolute maxed out point.
Right.
And so, that was part of it. Now, the asshole, the sound guy who I had literally let walk around with my money for a year and never bothered him about it, listened to this guy and went crazy and shut the stage off. And, he tried to fucking sue me afterwards, and we sued him, and he just went away. But I mean, it was just so crazy, the whole damn thing. Because, Donnie really could have, if we weren't the people we had been with everyone, that would have been the last event. And, I mean, I just couldn't, well, you read the book, I couldn't let it happen. I was going to stick around and give him one big fucking shitburger to eat just one more time. I just couldn't. I could not back down. I tell
you, as fucked up as everything had gotten, I mean, it was referred to as 80s in the parking lot. When I heard that, I was like, oh God, here we go. But what that detracted from was the bands that were there that weekend. Like I said, I had some friends come down. We gave them one of the rooms. We had the room. We were all just hanging out, watching great fucking bands. And that was probably the funnest one that I went to. The great one was with Lita Ford and Quiet Riot, because we were having a shitty day at work. But this one was the full day event. We were there. We went Friday, Saturday. It just I can understand why you don't do it anymore totally. But it was just for people, fans here in Melbourne, and who came from all over the state and probably the country, I would imagine. Thank you for creating that iconic of the 80s in the park. Totally awesome.
Yeah, well, you guys are so welcome. We maintained all the way along. We did it for the fans and the bands, and really nothing but a good time. And that was kind of what it was. I mean, we knew early on we weren't going to make our fortune off of it. It took me 6 years to almost break even, but we made a lot of great friends along the way, and we met a lot of cool bands, and we met really great people who helped us. And as much as there was a bunch of shit online and all that nonsense that took place with everybody else, it reinforced my faith in people rather than deterring from it. So
awesome. Well, we're going to keep an eye out for the 80s in August. And like I said, Metal Mayhem ROC we're probably 95%, just in case there's a hurricane or an ice storm or something.
Understood.
We definitely be on there and love to do a remote from there. Something with full access to everybody, so that we could just promote the event as much as possible, along with everybody else, photography, interviews, all that stuff.
Well, I really want to, and I've talked with the people I work for, and they're fine with it. For me, we're gonna try and get in as many bands as we had before with 80s in the Park, as many of the really good ones. And so because we lost a tremendous amount of footage that we were going to do a documentary about 80s in the Park on that 17, the redo in February 2018, the guy locked himself in his house and went crazy. And so we couldn't get the video from it. So we had great interviews. I mean, Chip from Nuff Snuff and people like that, Steve Blaze, they gave us these amazing long interviews talking about the event, from having been, there several times and all. And it was, we had a lot of cool footage. So we're going to try and redo that. And we're going to have a special section from everybody from Florida on the field, right on the pitch. So, yeah.
I got to see and talk with Chips Enough at Winfield's. They played a show there. Steve Blaze, I saw him at the Rockin' Pod in Nashville that we went to. And again, Lillian Axe at Winfield's. I tell you, there's a resurgence in this area again, or a want, let's say, for that music again.
Yeah.
And these promoters around here, they're not doing festivals, but they're bringing bands like Quiet Riot and bands like the Iron Maidens. Those girls tour more than Metallica probably ever toured at the height of their careers. So,
well, and they're better. They're easier on the eyes than Metallica ever was. So
when I saw them at Winfield's, the stage is so low there. The only person I could see was the head up of the lead singer. They're coming to a place called Area 142 up in Cocoa Beach. Perfect stage. No matter where you are, your perfect view. It doesn't matter. It's a nice venue, outdoor venue. So,
yeah, that's nice. I'm glad to hear it.
Sure. Thank you very much for joining us.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on, man.
Thank you, Richard. Have a good night. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Metal for Life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.